how much nurturing and coddling you would do for your son, because while you're doing it out of love and concern and compassion for your child, eventually they grow up with a sense of entitlement that they don't have to do anything to gain anything in life. They take on this entitlement mentality because the mother has always been there for them. She always gave it. I never had to ask for anything. I never had to want for anything. I never struggled with anything because my mother has always been there. And generally that's because of her own inner sense of I've got to make up the difference for the absence of the father. And then in many cases, the mother is angry with the father, so she takes it out on the son. And, so that dichotomy, there's a dichotomy there that cuts both ways, where she's over coddling, and then there's the other one that says she's angry at the son because the son reminds her of the father. and so the son is like, well, what did I do? Why are you so angry with me? And that creates, again, some deficiency in our emotions. There's some defects that have happened in our emotional development. Doctors say that a child learns and establishes their direction in life from the womb till about 7 years of age. And so after that 7 years, anything you do after that is reparative. You're trying to correct some behavior, and it takes time to do that. So it depends on when that separation or that divorce happens.
So many choices, so many decisions, and so little time. Do you wrestle to understand the equations of life? Start a business or start a job? Should you get in a relationship, or do you end one you're in? Is there more you should be doing with your life? What's your purpose and calling in life? Decisions. Are you at a point in your life where you need answers? There's definitely hope. Join the Unplugged experience. Get connected with noted life coach, spiritual teacher, and catalyst for change, Dr. Diane Clark, for her show called Unplugged.
Good morning, and thank you for tuning in to Unplugged. I hope that you have enjoyed this month of June, where we've been dealing with mentality. Each show has been focused on some dynamic to bless and encourage men. And today will be nothing less, because today we have back with us Pastor Michael Norman of the Movement Church. And today we're going to be talking about the dynamics that happens when the male figure or the husband leaves the home. The mother is there and there's an older male child. Some of the dysfunctions that we've seen develop in young men that affects them as they turn into husbands, fathers, and so forth, because of the dynamics of those situations. Help me welcome Pastor Michael Norman from Orlando, Florida. Good morning, Pastor.
Good morning.
It is so good to have you on the show again. Today we're going to dialogue about the dynamics of families when the father, the husband, has left the home. And many times we see that the oldest boy, sometimes the oldest girl, the oldest child, is pulled upon to act in a role that's not meant for them at that time. Right. And it can severely damage their ability to move forward in life, in relationship particularly. They can make it many times in life, but in relationship, there's a confusion there as to their role and their responsibilities. And I wanted to talk about that to see if we could help some men who were in situations like that, and then some younger mothers who are raising sons that may find themselves in that position. Let's talk about how we can help them.
Awesome. Well, again, I want to thank you, Dr. Clark, for the supreme privilege and honor it is to be on your show with you today. Now, when we talk about the dynamics of which you mentioned, I tend to want to make sure we first kind of appreciate the role of the husband in the context of a marriage, because that word husband is not just a single word. It's a compound word. It exists in two words. One is house and the other is band. And when you put them together, it's a husband. So the husband is the band around the house. He is actually the glue that keeps the family together. And when that glue or that husband is removed from the family dynamics, it introduces a whole set of emotional trauma and dynamics that affects the family or the individuals in the family in a very negative way oftentimes. But it is important to recognize that in a divorce, there are no winners. Whether you instigated the divorce or, excuse me, whether you instigated the divorce or you are the victim of a divorce, there are no winners because it yields very significant emotional drama and trauma into the lives of all that are involved: the husband, the wife, and the child or the children. So it's important to recognize that fact. And that's why I know this may sound a little antiquated, but that's why we advocate for waiting until you are married before having children. Because again, the child being birthed outside of that house band makes them susceptible to all manner of influence from all manner of individuals. Because again, the husband is literally the one who helps to bring vision and focus, and he's the one who charts the course. We're going this way. This is the type of family we're going to be. This is the direction we're going to go in. And when you lose that, it is a very significant injury, both to the marriage and to the individuals in the marriage or in the family dynamics. Now, one last thing I will say, well, not maybe the last thing. I'm a pastor. The pastor never.
Your first close.
Yeah, my first closing. Let me also say that when it comes to the topic of marriage, again, if a woman goes into a marriage with or the man goes into the idea of a marriage thinking that this marriage is somehow going to complete them, then that already by default introduces an idea of dysfunction in some area. There is a deficiency in some area of their life emotionally. So I always say a marriage is not designed to complete you. It's not a 50-50 proposition. 50-50 only means you bring your defect and I bring my defect, and let's just see what happens. you know, but it has to be 100 plus 100. Okay, so a marriage is not designed. It's not designed to complement. I'm sorry, it's not designed to compete, but it's designed to complement. Mm-hmm. So we bring our skill sets, we bring our personalities together in such a way that they complement one another. And once we do that, then we have the highest potential for success and a very fruitful and productive marriage, as God has purposed it to be fruitful and multiply.
That is so important because as parents, we have a very, very supreme, vital, important, all of the adjectives you can name in what happens to the quality of life that child produces as they're growing. Absolutely. and as adults. We have to be so very careful. And mm-hmm. I have come in contact with men who only wanted to be nurtured. And then as you get to know them and you discover their background, you discover that many of them came from homes where the mother raised them. Mm-hmm. And if that mother didn't have like just wisdom, guidance, whether it was from the Holy Ghost or another male, what she did was made them, because she didn't want him to be a sissy, as we called it. Yeah, you gonna be a man, and they're looking like, okay, what is that right now? I want to play my video games. I want to go outside and shoot hoops or whatever. But so what she does is either rejects him or she over nurtures him so that he's not. Right now, Pastor, I don't know if you've realized this. We have a whole generation of men who don't know how to change a doorknob. And you say, well, why is that important? Well, if you're going to own your own home, you don't want to spend all your money having other people do the work for you.
Amen. Amen. My dad tried to show me how to do something simple as how to change a battery in the car. But I was a musician as a young child, some would call the prodigy. So I was always going somewhere, playing for revivals or conferences, for church services. So I never had time to watch him change a battery or a carburetor until I got married. And when I got married, we had our first car, and it was basically a 1987 Get Out and Push. And so when it finally broke down, I spent hundreds of dollars trying to fix the problem, changed the battery, bought a new alternator. And one day I went to a mechanic. He says, "Yeah, here's your problem. $10, voltage regulator." I spent
Okay.
over $600 when all I had to spend was $10 for a voltage regulator. I got on the phone that day. I called my dad up and I said, "Father, I repent." So
He was glad to hear that, I'm sure.
yeah,
My dad had three girls. It's three of us, three girls. And I'm sure he wanted a boy, but just didn't get a boy. But was no hope of having a boy. What he did with his girls, he made us all learn how to drive. We couldn't even touch the the gas pedal. And Pastor, it was back in the day when you had to shift the gears on.
oh yeah, I love that
Okay, yeah, and
manual shift.
clutch and okay.
Yeah. Hmm.
And we couldn't even see over the dashboard, but it was important to him that we knew how to drive. He taught us how to change the oil. He taught us about the battery cables. It's not always the battery, it's the connect, things like that. So I grew up with that knowledge, which could become very intimidating to a man because
Yeah.
then they assume you know everything, you know what to do, you know how to do. And you're like, no, I don't. I had to learn these things growing up, but I don't want to do them. To this day, I hate pumping gas. I hate it. I hate it. Because I got so accustomed. My dad said, well, you don't do that. You let me do that. You let me do those things. So it can really have an impact on the female children in the family as well.
Yeah.
Because the only thing I knew about the house was you had to clean. I grew up in a museum. It felt like
Yeah.
because everything had to be in place. Everything had to be clean and it had to be cleaned. I'm not talking about the way kids wash dishes now. They go in, they'll half wash them and say they're done, and everything's in the dish drainer, pots in the refrigerator. Not that you had to really clean,
Right.
and that's what I learned about cleaning house. So I thought, okay, this is what women do. This is what women do. And then when
Yeah.
my dad taught me that, I said, oh well, now I know how to take on life. I did not.
Did not.
There was so much more. And even in my own, when I became grown, married, and had children, I went through a divorce. And my son was the oldest. And he withdrew. I didn't even know, didn't recognize it because of the drama and the trauma that I was in. He
Mhm.
just completely withdrew when his dad left. And I didn't know what to do with him. So, of course, what does a mother do? Get you involved in activities and what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? And as a result of that, he did not get the nurturing from me because I didn't want to make him a husband or make him a responsible person because he was just too young.
Right.
But I have met men who were in that situation, Pastor, and
Mhm.
I would like for you to speak to that. If some of the young men that are watching the show have experienced that, how they can recoup or recover. What are some things that they can do to turn their lives around in that situation?
Tragically, within our community, uh, divorce is at a higher level than marriage itself. 70% of marriages are ending in divorce, and it yield again, as I said earlier, there is no winners in a divorce, particularly when a child is involved. But oftentimes, what happens is because a mother is a nurturer. That's her nature. That's her natural proclivity is to nurture. I often tease mothers about how they try to groom their sons, but by coddling them and hugging them. And there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself, in its place and in its proper portion. But when it gets to the place where if your son falls on the ground as he's walking, but you get in and you get mad at the ground for making your son cry, bad ground, you made my son cry. Well, you're creating a cognitive dissonance where he's not able to stand on his own 2 feet, and you're becoming somewhat making him a surrogate father in that regard. In a lot of cases, mothers over compensate for the absence of the father and try to do way too much. But I'm of the impression that there's some purpose to pain. There's some purpose to struggle. That it yields some very positive effects. It develops even within us an internal fortitude. Even the Bible suggests that suffering is good in its proper portion, that it helps to build something up in us. And so that's my word to every mother, is to be careful of how much nurturing and coddling you would do for your son, because while you're doing it out of love and concern and compassion for your child, eventually they grow up with a sense of entitlement that they don't have to do anything to gain anything in life. They take on this entitlement mentality because the mother has always been there for them. She always gave it. I never had to ask for anything. I never had to want for anything. I've never struggled with anything because my mother has always been there. And generally that's because of her own inner sense of I've got to make up the difference for the absence of the father. Mm-hmm. And then in many cases, the mother is angry with the father, so she takes it out on the son. So that dichotomy, there's a dichotomy there that cuts both ways, where she's over coddling, and then there's the other one that says she's angry at the son because the son reminds her of the father. and so the son is like, what did I do? Why are you so angry with me? And that creates again some deficiency in our emotions. There's some defect that'll happen in our emotional development. Doctors say that a child learns and establishes their direction in life from the womb till about 7 years of age. Mm-hmm. And so after that 7 years, anything you do after that is reparative. You're trying to correct some behavior, and it takes time to do that. So it depends on when that separation or that divorce happens, how it impacts that child. Is if it's at the age of 5, 6. Generally, they're resilient and they can begin to recover if the mother, and of course, if that assuming the mother has, custody of the child, that she recognized her role and as a mother, and recognize the importance of a father figure for the child. That doesn't mean you go out and date every man and try to find a father for him. But by and large, what a man does, particularly father for his son, is if that son falls down, the father doesn't hit the ground and call the ground bad. He tells that son, get up, son. That didn't hurt. You can make it through that. That's a life lesson. And so those are the things that a mother has to appreciate, that when he does fall, when he makes a mistake, don't blame everybody for his mistake, because you literally are creating a monster that will show up in later years and cause you grief. And it's really ironic how that a mother who does everything, buys him the latest Jordan, these shoes, do you know how much these tennis shoes cost now? These Jordans are like, the cheapest is like $200.
I know.
It's crazy. But she buys him the best of everything, only to discover, and never puts a demand on him. Mm-hmm. Never puts any kind of demand. And this, one of the things I tell my daughters, and I've been telling them this since they were little girls. And I tell them this is a very important life lesson for every woman. Never, whenever you meet a man, never accept him as he is, because it becomes self-evident that you settled too soon. What do I mean by that? Is if you're interrupting the maturation process, allow him space to fall, because in his falling, he's going to figure out how to succeed. But if you're always there putting a pad under him, making sure he never feels pain, never feels suffering, or you're guilty because his father left and now you got to double up on your affection, double up on your coddling, you're literally creating something that you will not appreciate later on in life, because it creates a sense of entitlement. And when he's older, he'll expect you to do that. At the age of 40 and 45 years of age, he still expect mom to come to the rescue. So please heed my warnings, every mother.
That is so true. And what's sad about that is that it's repairable. But taking the energy and the time to really do a self-assessment and ask yourself, why am I doing this? I met this beautiful young lady. I want her in my life, but she's just as dysfunctional as you are. So she comes into the relationship giving everything, doing everything. Why? Because she wants to be loved. She wants to be accepted by this father who was not there. And you're not mature enough, to handle that role. And you start the relationship off with false expectations that are often unspoken.
That's a good one. That's a chapter in my forthcoming book, Shameless Plug. It's
Oh,
coming out. It's called 12 Things That Ruin Relationship, a guide to knowing when it's safe to love. And one of the chapter is in the book is unrealistic expectations.
that is
I
so
need
important.
you to sign. Give me an endorsement on that.
Okay, I'll have to do that. I want to read the transcripts. Yeah, be happy to.
We'll
It
get it
is
to you.
all right. It's so important, Pastor, in this day and time, people are feeling hopeless, helpless, that there's no way out. We have more suicides now than
Yeah,
we have ever had
that's
in the
right.
history of not just this nation. You don't really hear from other nations about them committing suicide. But in our nation, it's like the next pastime. And it is because of these relational dysfunctions that
Right.
we carry into our marriages. We have them on the job so
Right.
that we don't excel. We feel that our education alone should cause us to excel. But you and your education have to become one, because there's a personality behind that. And in this age of entitlement, my motto is spoil people don't do well. And in my pastoring, I would try to help parents with that, but they would resent the fact that I was saying spoiled children don't do well in life, only to have the children. I was around long enough to see some of them grow up and they couldn't make the adjustment. They couldn't jump the gap. They were expecting things to be done for them, come to my rescue. And typically the stress was with the mother. The father was like, yeah, that's right. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. But in our ministries, we have got to move to the reality of the fact that we are supposed to bring people to transformation. We can't make them change, but we need to provide the information for them to
Mhm.
choose how to change.
Right. That's very important. What you're saying. Life in itself as an individual is challenging. It's filled with vicissitudes, ups and downs, ins and outs. To navigate life as a single person is challenging enough. But
Yeah.
when you add another individual and then a third individual, you're building a family together, and those dysfunctions hasn't been addressed or confronted. Then that's how you create cycles. That's how some people call it. What do you call it? Generational curses.
Yeah.
Well, it's not necessarily generational curses as much as it's generational behavior. And we teach and we train our children to behave in the way that we behave. And so I don't know, and then we're shocked when they act like we act.
You're doing acting like me. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, but we only do what has been modeled before us. We're a mirror image, generally speaking, of what's been modeled before us. I train my children up and parent the way my parents parented me, you know, and that's not always the best course of action. depending on what your parents' experiences were.
Mhm. That is so true, because what worked in our generation is not working on this generation. They need more responsibility. They need more of the reality of life.
Hmm.
But what has happened is, we're living better. We have better jobs. We're making more money. Not only that, we have more businesses, and a lot of them Black owned, women owned. So we have money. We're handling finance, but we're not investing. We're not making more money with it. We are buying 2-year olds Jordans. We're buying 2-year olds name brand jeans and shirts. They don't care. They don't even want on any clothes. They want to run around in a diaper. But because the abundance has warped the reality of what life is really about.
Yeah.
And the church has a very intricate role in helping people come to the reality of life.
Absolutely. And again, it's important that you say that, because one of my personal mottos is drawn from John 10:10 in the Bible. It says that the thief comes but for to kill, steal, and to destroy. But
Mhm.
I have come that you might have life and that more abundantly. So I said, but the problem with the religious world is that we majored on having church and not majored on having life. And so consequently, we're having dysfunctional churches with dysfunctional behavior because we've never paid attention to how to do life. We've majored on Sunday, but we minor on Monday.
That is so good. That is so true, Pastor. And now, though, the flip side of that, because of so much information and access to information, I believe that a lot of the community of the church is trying to shift that. But what they've shifted it to is greed and lust and money, the lust for other things.
Yeah.
And they've gotten away from the simplicity of Christ. They want to live, but living to them is the standard that the world has set, and not the standard that the kingdom has set.
Well, it would seem to me that God has no real issue with abundance, being
Not at
blessed
all.
and prospering. You can see it in the Genesis. As soon as he finished making man and woman, he gives them everything he made up to his throne. So
Mhm.
God is about blessing, but there's a process to prosperity. You can't ignore the process. When God calls Moses out and the children of Israel out of Egypt by saying, "Hey, I've got a promised land flowing with milk and honey. That's where I want to take you."
Mhm.
Well, what they didn't recognize is while they were in slavery and they were in suffering, they were like, "Yes, we want that promised land." So but because God had to prepare them for that promised land by allowing them to go through the wilderness. See, and you can see through that wilderness experience how those who still had a mentality of slavery were willing to go back to Egypt
Right.
rather than to dare whatever situation and endure whatever situation they had to do to get to the promised land.
Yeah. And it happens in relationship. You get married, you have your first challenge. What you want to do is walk away,
Mm-mm.
because you hadn't mastered your wilderness experience.
Right.
And it culminates in pain, disappointment, and that just generates more pain because you haven't dealt with the issue. And Pastor, I want you to take a moment and really just speak to. I really want to um, engage men to bring change, because they're the true leaders. They're the true leaders. I know women can lead. I'm not talking about gender issues, but men are really the true leaders. They head up the things that God designed for life and for kingdom in the earth. And I want you to speak to some men who find themselves in places of dilemma for one reason or another, an answer to come out of it, what
Mhm.
they can do besides walking away. Walking away could look like divorce, it could look like an addiction, it can look like just
Right.
becoming emotionally unavailable. I'd like for you to take a few moments and just speak to men that there's hope and there's recovery for them.
Absolutely, there is. And I want every man that's watching to realize, number one, you're valuable. You have a purpose. You have a destiny, that your life is not a mistake. Even though your father may have left the family unit, that does not mean he took your purpose with him. And so, one of the biggest thing I like to tell the story about Ahithophel. Ahithophel in the Bible was King David's right hand man, but Ahithophel harbored vengeance or anxiety in his heart towards animosity towards David. The reason he did was because David had his son-in-law killed. The son Uriah was the wife, the husband of the wife of Bathsheba, was Bathsheba's husband, but Ahithophel was Uriah's father-in-law, and so he harbored anxiety. I mean, he harbored resentment against David for years. The story ends with Ahithophel killing himself. So, what am I saying? I'm saying you have to come to a place where you're willing to let that anger and that resentment go, because healing cannot begin until you do. To hold resentment is literally the same as drinking poison and expecting your enemy to die. And so I know it's simplistic, but at some point you have to get to a place where you realize it is what it is. My dad left me. It's not because he hated me. My mom might not even like my dad, but it's not because she doesn't like me. And at some point, you're praying the very simple prayer, Father, would you just introduce me to me? And the Bible says even God will become a father to the fatherless. I'm a living example. Although my dad was around, but he did the best that he could with what he knew. But there were some deficiencies within our family unit. And God literally made up the difference. Where I lost vision, where I had low self-esteem, and I didn't have any direction for my life, God helped me to discover that. And you, as a man, is a living proof that God has a purpose for your life, because man or men are the very foundation upon which all of humanity is made. So take up your rightful place, learn to release. It may not happen overnight, but make up in your mind, I'm going to do it. I might not feel like doing it right now, but I'm saying I am going to do it. I'm going to release that anger, release that resentment, and allow the healing virtue of Christ to begin to manifest in your heart, so that you can go on and break that dynamic where it won't show up in your marriage. That just because your parents' marriage failed, it will not show up. You'll be the one to break that dynamic. You're going to have a healthy and a fruitful life, and you can be able to live as God designed you to live, that you would be prosperous, that you would be fruitful, and that you would be productive. You can do it, and you can have that marriage till death do you part.
That is awesome instruction and encouragement to our men. I believe that God is going to use as the kingdom message is expanded with understanding, that he's going to use men like yourself to bring reality to our young men. And instead of writing this generation off, we're literally going to bring transformation to their lives. I just believe that. I choose to believe that. And Pastor Michael Norman, I celebrate you. It is such a blessing to know you. It's such a blessing to have you as my pastor. I'm so grateful. Pastor Michael Norman is the pastor of the Movement Church in Orlando, Florida, where they are transforming culture. Pastor, you want to tell them where you're located, or how you? Yeah.
Sure. Now, currently we meet every Sunday at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. So that means you get to sleep in. Okay. So we don't have an early service. 1 p.m. in the afternoon, 3839. It's called Winter Rose Drive, right here in Orlando, 3839 Winter Rose Drive. Now, what you can do is, for more information, is simply write us at the Movement Church INT@gmail.com. That's the Movement Church INT@gmail.com, and we'll get you more information.
Thank you so much. I trust that you've enjoyed this broadcast. We'll be back next Thursday with another exciting message that will bring encouragement, enlightenment, and hope to you. God bless you until next week.
Put a seed in the ground and name your seed. Experience the blessings of the Lord by sowing into this outreach. Help us take the gospel around the world. You can do so by going to Cash App. Type in the dollar amount you would like to give, and then type in $D Clark Ministries in the For section. Make sure you include your telephone number and a small prayer request. I can assure you that our prayer counselors will be praying for your needs. If this encounter has been a blessing to you, send us an email at dclarkministries@gmail.com and let us know how we've been a blessing to you. Or write us a letter or drop us a seed at Dr. Diane Clark, P.O. Box 9148, Jacksonville, Florida, 32208. Or call 904-419-9831. Stay connected with Dr. Clark and the Unplugged Ministry. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Like our Facebook page and Instagram family. This way, when we go live, you'll get an alert the doctor is live. To find out more about Dr. Clark, go to my website today. And while you're there, become a partner? Go to DianeUnplugged.com. So you've been watching the show. Would you like to be a content provider yourself and develop a show for the Inspire Network? Please give us a call today at 904-389-5592 or go to www.connecttv.com.